in the Observer this week, there was a note mentioning that Seth Rollins is now scheduled to be Brock Lesnar's opponent as of today. That, of course, could change. But he is scheduled to be Brock Lesnar's opponent at WrestleMania. Now, he didn't. It's interesting to note that in what I saw in the newsletter, because this was reported everywhere, but nowhere in what Meltzer wrote did he say that it was scheduled to be for the Universal Championship. You have to assume it would be, because I don't see Braun Strowman taking that title from Brock at the Royal Rumble. And that may well be the only match that Brock has between now and WrestleMania. So you would assume it's going to be a championship match, but that was not specifically stated. And not only is Seth Rollins scheduled to face Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania, but the belief is that the match will, in some way, shape, or form, will play off of Roman Reigns. So Roman Reigns and his leukemia will be part of the storyline heading into WrestleMania. First of all, let me say this. It was good to see Roman Reigns on the sideline this week. He was sidelined at the Georgia Tech game. He played for Georgia Tech during his college years. He looked good. You know, he looked to be in good spirits. He was laughing and yucking it up. And hopefully things are going well so far with his treatment. So let me just say that. I don't like this idea of his illness being part of the WrestleMania build. I think it's fine to acknowledge his speech. Like, I'm picturing what a video package would look like, for example, building up to a Seth Rollins, Brock Lesnar match at WrestleMania. It's fair game to play clips from the Roman speech when he came out and he relinquished the championship, because that is part of the storyline. I mean, there were storyline implications for what happened with Roman Reigns. You shouldn't just ignore it. So them acknowledging it and showing footage of Roman's speech and him surrendering the title, I think is fine. I think that's all fair game. And even going as far as to talk about how, you know, Brock Lesnar got the belt back after Roman had worked so hard to defeat him, and now Seth is going to go to WrestleMania and he's going to win the championship for his friend and his brother in Roman Reigns. Something like that is fine. That's totally fine. Anything more than that is exploitation. And frankly, it's just not necessary. Seth Rollins was the hottest act on Monday Night Raw only a few months ago. He's still popular. I'm not saying he's not popular, but there was a different vibe. There was a different feeling in June, July, August when it came to Rollins, where he just felt like this is the guy that should be going to SummerSlam, frankly, to challenge for the championship, and not Roman Reigns. But they stuck with their plan. They went with Roman. Of course, in the end, who knew that this would happen? And they kind of screwed themselves, and now the belt is back on Brock Lesnar. And the belt is back basically being defended once every quarter now in this company. Rollins against Lesnar has enough juice and has enough backstory of its own without needing to exploit the fact that Roman Reigns has cancer. Rollins and Lesnar have a history dating all the way back to WrestleMania 31. Brock lost his championship to Seth Rollins. He didn't get pinned by him that night. And in fact, the one singles match that these two had, which came, many, many months later, didn't even have a finish. Seth was defending his championship and Brock pretty much had him beat. He had him dead to rights, hit an F5, but there was no finish. And then, of course, Rollins was involved in that classic triple threat at the Royal Rumble that one year with him and Lesnar. And actually, that was the same year even before the cash-in at WrestleMania. So actually, their history goes back even before WrestleMania 31. So there's a history there. There's unfinished business between these two guys. You don't need to step over that line into exploitation territory, which is what I fear is going to end up happening. It wouldn't be the first time this company has done that before. I just don't think it's necessary. So I read that and I start to worry. I go, oh boy, there's no telling how far they're going to go with this. But I think a simple acknowledgement of the Roman stuff is fine. Just don't get too heavy-handed with it. If that is the match for WrestleMania, I think that's fine. I think Seth Rollins against Brock Lesnar would make for a fine championship match at WrestleMania. Not the main event. The main event is already reserved for two other people. You can't have that table. You can't have our nicest table, but we'll give you that other nice table in the back of the restaurant. That belongs to Brock Lesnar and Seth Rollins. Now, if it is Rollins challenging for the championship, question is, where does that leave Drew McIntyre? Drew McIntyre is on the ascent. Drew McIntyre was put over strong by Kurt Angle a few weeks ago, and They are clearly building Drew for bigger and better things, and I made the comment many months ago that if this guy isn't champion or a champion by the time WrestleMania 35 rolls around, then these people are doing something wrong. And now we're not too far off from WrestleMania. He was the Raw Tag Team Champion for a while. I don't know that this guy is going to end up with championship gold by or before WrestleMania. But I know right now Seth Rollins is the Intercontinental Champion. Maybe Drew McIntyre wins the IC title off of Rollins. That way, if Seth goes on, let's say to win the Royal Rumble, he beats Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania to win the championship. And by the way, there is no guarantee that he will beat Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar has had a very good WrestleMania. Actually, the last time Brock Lesnar lost at WrestleMania was 31, was the match where Seth cashed in. And you could even say that. Now, he wasn't pinned. So you want to go back even further than that. The last time Brock Lesnar was flat out pinned and beaten at WrestleMania, you'd have to go all the way back to you-know-who, Triple H, of course, at WrestleMania 29. So Brock Lesnar, generally speaking, does pretty well for himself at WrestleMania. And it's one of those things I just talked about it before. Vince McMahon loves to deliver surprises to the crowd. Let's have him beat Roman Reigns this year. They won't expect that. So it is not at all a guarantee that if that is the match that Seth's walking out with that championship. But let's say he does, after Drew had already beaten him months before to win the IC title. Well, now, coming out of WrestleMania, McIntyre can stake his claim to being the number one contender because he's already beaten Rollins. Or whatever they want to call him, since apparently the words number one contender are now on the list of banned terms in WWE. We already know the words common sense are on that list also. So I'm curious what happens with Drew because he is, again, he's on the ascent. There's no obvious match for him at WrestleMania right now, unless they do something with him and Dolph. And to me, that hardly seems like a WrestleMania worthy match for him. Maybe him and Braun. You know, when Braun inevitably fails again, what's Braun Strowman going to do at WrestleMania? Maybe they do a singles match with him and Drew. Look, the original lineup for the TLC pay-per-view on the SAP Center website had Braun Strowman against Drew McIntyre listed on the card. And then a week later it changed to Braun Strowman against Baron Corbin. Perhaps they had second thoughts and said, you know what, let's hold off on McIntyre and Strowman and instead we'll do that match at WrestleMania. That's a possibility. But despite the tasteless mention of Roman that they had with Ambrose on Monday, I did want to mention this. There was something cool that happened. The Staples Center, where they were for the show last week, presented Triple H and Stephanie backstage with a check for $10,000 in Roman Reigns' name to be donated to the charity of his choice. And that charity was Children's Health Dallas. So I thought that was a cool story. That's a positive way to play off a horrible situation with Roman Reigns. I don't need to see this guy and his illness exploited on TV for some shitty storyline that doesn't need it. But stories like this I'd like to hear more of.